What is going on, Movie Meals? Movie Meals. Thank you, Movie Meal patrons. Kimberly, Karen, before we get into it, guys, we're going to give one of these free, good-looking hoodies away once we cross 2,000. We're going to give it away to a fan who's been liking, subscribing. I know we've been out a lot more than we've been in on the channel at the moment. A lot of things happened over the last month, but should have hopefully some consistency. Podcast will be back tomorrow. So yeah, we're here to talk Civil War, Alex Garland's new film. Let's go ahead and get into it. Non-spoiler review. Kyle, what were your positives here of Civil War?
Well, for me, I had a good time watching Civil War. What I found most intriguing about the movie was not so much of its political stances, or in terms of, for the movie specifically, like it's set up to how our American world is like in the brink of a civil war within the premise of the movie, but just in terms of that, no matter what the outcome could have been for like someone's interpretation of the movie, is that the problem of the movie is that we're so divided that we're in the civil war no matter what the case may be. So I liked it for that because it lent to our protagonists of the movie, who are war journalists who photograph like war events, and I liked seeing their positioning on trying to be indifferent and trying to just capture what's going on currently, but they're also getting like this awakening into the problems that are going on for like the premise of the movie as they journey towards Washington, D.C. to get an interview with the president, which is the premise of the movie. So I thought that the cast did a very good job with that premise, but I also thought Alex Garland himself did a very good job with that premise. I really liked the angle of it from like a war photographer's point of view rather than, you know, most war movies, so to speak, where it comes from like a military point of view. So that's really what I enjoy the most for the movie, as well as Alex Garland's direction in making action sequences that just build and build on top of one another, but also there's just many more quiet and nuanced scenes that are also just as impactful. So I felt like this movie just had a good mix of everything. I thought some of his commentary was intriguing, and I also thought that it really lent to some great drama, whether it's action based or more of a personal narrative when it came to the dramatic angles of it.
All right. Yeah, I liked it quite a bit. I went in with a kind of idea of where I thought the story was going to go, and was left in kind of an interesting state when the movie ended because it didn't give me that. And the more I've thought about it, the more I have really, really come to love this movie. I think Garland knocks it out of the park. He really is one of the better working directors today. I think he brings a nuance to movies that not a lot of people get, and he is also really spread out in what he does. I mean, Civil War to his TV show Devs, to Men, to Ex Machina, to all the way to just some of his writing pieces are wildly different. He has a really wide range, and he brings nuance to a story that could have been a lot different in the hands of a director not as good. I remember thinking, if you had given this script to someone else, or just had someone else come up with this idea, because Garland also was one of the screenwriters on the script, but if you give it to somebody else who is just more of an average director, you're going to get a product that I think I was actually expecting going in. I thought it would be a little bit more if we just are following these photographers through major battle after major battle after major battle till we get to the big battle. And it wasn't that. And my theater experience was interesting. There was a wide range of people in there. I overheard a lot of conversations at the end of the movie. I heard people saying they wanted what I was just saying, and I heard a lot of people saying they really liked the way it went. Kyle and I have had a couple deep conversations. Now that it's been out a couple days, I have seen a little bit more of a divisive take on the movie. Now that with more casuals, I still don't feel I've seen it as much in the critics' side, but I have seen it more with pundits and casuals myself. But I think this movie is brilliant. And I think not only from a technical aspect of what Garland can do with the camera, how to set up a shot and everything, I think he took this in the direction it needed to go. and I came away really loving it. Showing it, he literally shows the movie, and this isn't really a spoiler, but he literally shows it in a way through the lens of these photographers, and it gives you a moment to really think back of all these horrific images we see in real life, and gives you a moment to go, oh wow, I've never thought about the person who took that picture. I never
Mm.
thought about what somebody might actually have to go through as a wartime photographer. And I thought that was brilliant, and it allowed for him to show us all aspects of what a civil war in this country might look like. There were people that they meet along their journey in the movie that I have met those people. Were they
Mm.
having guns in their hands? No, but I've met those people. I've met some of those despicable people who would go that
Same
direction
energy.
in that kind of environment. Um,
Yeah.
and I will say politically, uh, I really believe that it doesn't poke the bear at all. I think a lot of people go into the movie expecting it to really poke at one direction of our current political aspect. I don't want to get too political here, but I do want to touch on it. And I don't think he does that at all. I think everything you can very, very clearly argue is a stretch, because the events of the movie, the events of why states are trying to secede, is something that has never happened in the country. You can argue that maybe it's been attempted in our political climate, and that people have tried to get to this point where then states might eventually lead to a secession. But there is nothing in the movie that is directly saying we're on this side or this side. There's
Sure.
nothing. And it shows the brutality of what the politics and the war will be. And the few negatives I have seen, a lot of people I think are not getting that they didn't want that. They wanted it to pick a stance. And I
Mm.
say that is a poor decision, because we're not the characters we follow in the story with Kirsten Dunst and the others are they really are just us in this situation. They are gathering the pictures for us as the audience, and so it gives us a full range of what it would actually be like in this world, in this country, if this kind of happened. And that is a more brilliant move, and I think that just shows that this is a brilliant director behind the camera. I left the movie and I was like, look, this isn't just somebody making a fun art house movie like I felt with Garland's Men, and I loved Men, but it is weird. It's not for everybody. It's wild. But this is where he goes, all right, give me something that everybody can, this is more Saving Private Ryan than it is an average war movie. It really is. It's nuanced and it develops. And some of the arguments I'm seeing are literally, this movie doesn't speak politically, but that's because you went in wanting it to, and you wanted him. He's not an American. He's not from here. He's looking at it from an outside view. That's what I would rather see
It
anyway. I think
definitely
that's
is.
what?
It definitely is. Yeah. It's an outside view for sure.
Yeah, but that's what I think we need.
Mm.
If
Sure.
he does make a movie where it takes one stance very harsh, then I don't think it works. I think it's an average movie to just please one side of a already kind of heated political area instead of the other. And this way, he really doesn't. And he does a good job in a weird way of like, some of these people, like these are your neighbors, and it's like I don't like I'd be terrified in that situation, but I also like I get it in a way, and I think it's just brilliant. The performances are phenomenal. It's some of the best Kirsten Dunst I think we've seen in a long, long time. I cannot
Mm.
remember her name, but the girl from the Elvis movie, Priscilla, who played Priscilla,
Kaylee
she's
Spaney.
excellent. She is excellent
Yeah.
in this movie. She shows so much in this movie. It is fantastic. And the last positive I want to touch on is the movie, what it really does at the end of the day, more than it is a war movie. It's really a movie. Like if people want political commentary, that's what I keep seeing. I got it or I didn't. The political commentary has nothing to do with politics and the divide of the country. The political commentary of the movie, by showing it through the lens of a wartime photographer, is showing you what people will do to not only get to a story, but to be first to a story. And
Yeah.
that is what is so insane about this movie. That is the number one stance that I think the movie is really like. That's the main theme of the movie. And I think people are leaving, and that's not the theme they went in wanting. So they walked out and they're like, blah, 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 blah. And what are you talking about? It absolutely hit all these on the head. I loved it. I thought this movie was brilliant. I do think it's one of Garland's best. No, he's not necessarily done. He's working on a movie right now. Everybody calm down. I was texting my brother last night who didn't know that. And I was like, no, he's making a movie right now. He's literally working on it. He's got one more. And then you never know. People, 10 years from now, he finally makes another script. He writes incredible movies. He's been a great writer for a long time. So, yeah, I loved it. Kyle, what were your negatives?
Real quick, I do want to piggyback off of what you're saying on the being first to the story part of the movie's themes, which was really like one of my bigger takeaways. I'm not really sure if I was able to mention it in my positives previously, but I did like that angle about the movie too. I think while it does do a good job at highlighting like war photographers and war journalists and like what the amount of like strength and mental fortitude they have to go through in order to like do their job, I do think at the same time it was also a pretty good it was pretty good critically of like journalism, at least in my opinion. I felt like it wasn't just being like an ode to journalists. I also felt like it was being critical of journalism and their position on how to help us guide, I guess is the best word I can think of, help us guide or let us learn about like the state of affairs and not just trying to be first to the story just for the sake of being first to it. Like there just needs to be possibly a bit more integrity behind journalism rather than just trying to, get what's the most shocking first and move on with the day instead of like, no, your words hold power and your words, your imagery, whatever it's supposed to be, like it does hold power and it can't just be for the sake of the shock value of getting like the clicks that you want. It has to be something more. It has to be something to help us as a nation be brought more back together rather than us be so divided. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because that was like my bigger takeaway of the movie more so than like, what side or what themes is trying to speak of politically. That was the angle that I really appreciate most about the movie.
Me too. I'm going to add off of you real quick before we get to those negatives. I do also want to point out, because you and I have talked about the movie a lot over the last day or so, and I don't understand how anyone is taking away an ode to journalism. I think an ode to journalism and the greatness of journalism is more of a movie like Spotlight and the great and good that journalism can do, where this is critiquing it. But I also want to point out, people went in hearing the same line in the same trailer over and over. The Western forces of Texas and California. It's not Texas and California versus the entire United States. If you watch the movie, there's 4 factions going at it and different alliances within those factions. Florida is allied with a ton of different states in this movie, and they are supplying and not supplying with the Western forces. And there's a handful of states that are supporting the president and not. And it's not 2 states versus the other 48. It is a complete, it's not a straight divide. It's a complete dismantling. And that is even more interesting because people went in expecting one thing, or they're not going in to see the movie because they don't like that. They think that stance is stupid. And I don't think people are really, they're not going in and watching it full fledged. And they drop little lines. It's hard to keep up with. They drop little lines of what actually, because they don't necessarily tell you how it started, but they do drop little lines and breadcrumbs for us to be like, oh, I think that's how it started.
Right.
And I think that's brilliant. Anyway, go ahead.
It's also fiction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, like the themes are real world.
Realistic fiction, yeah.
Yeah, realistic fiction. Yes, it is that. But at the same time, it's also fiction at the end of the day. So, like, for myself, I wasn't really bothered if that was the premise of it because, like, maybe it would have been interesting no matter what. I don't know. I hadn't seen the movie, so...
Well, let me say this.
Sure,
I want to... Go
ahead.
It's realistic fiction for us. It is not. It is real life for other countries. There are countries at war. There are countries right now fighting for their life. So this is just a depiction of this massive, the United States and the
Mhm.
massive kind of country and power that they have become and whatnot. But I just wanted to also point that out there because depending on what your view is, your background, you might look at this very, very differently if you are or are not from America or if you have different lineage or heritage or anything like that. So, and if you have that and you're watching the video, please comment what your take was and your thoughts because I'd love to hear
Yeah.
them. But go ahead, Kyle. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off again.
No, that's okay. As for myself with the negatives, I don't know. I can't really. I've been able to see the movie for a few days now, and I haven't really struck anything to mind that I really need to be like nitpicky or critical about. I suppose maybe the characters for some people could be a bit flat for some
No,
audiences, but
stop.
that's I will admit I'm stretching on that, but I thought that the character work in this movie was very good, but I could just see that being for some people's taste, or maybe for some people going into the movie, they do want it to be um, more of like choosing a political side of like what its messaging is trying to be, which fair enough, that's your prerogative. But at the same time, I also do like that we're having such big reactions and big differences of opinions when it comes to this movie. I think it is more exciting, more interesting to hear what people have to say rather than everyone just kind of being in the middle of the movie and be like, it was good, it was fine, good time. Those type of reactions that we see from multiple other movies. At the same time, some of the takes, like I personally don't really understand, and I think are a bit baffling. But at the same time, it is at least more interesting of a conversation that I've seen as compared to something more agreeable and in the middle. So yeah, I'm kind of a stretching thin with like what negatives I really have to say about this movie because the things that I got out of this movie really worked for me, and overall, it gave me a heck of a ride to say the least. One with adrenaline, but also with a bit of fear in the back of the head at the same time.
Yeah, I don't have any negatives. I can't think of one. If anything, I've thought of. I gave it 4 on Letterbox, and I think I've got to move that up to a 4.5 because I
Wow.
just have continued to think and think and think on this movie, and that is the sign of a great movie. It's a short movie too. It's an hour and a half. It's just barely over that hour and a half mark. They do a lot in 90 minutes, and that is excellent. It's excellent. He crafts such a well thought out story for 90 minutes of screen time. It is
Mm.
so good what Alex Garland is able to do. Yeah, I loved it. But all right, guys, what did you think? Comment below. Let us know. I'm going to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you, Meal patrons. Help us get to that 2,000. Comment what your thoughts were on the movie. We're very curious to see what you all think. And as always, thanks for watching, Mom.
See you guys.